Guten Morgen. Before I start, a few things. Today is June 28th of June 2019, which is John Wesley's birthday. So, in 1771, on his birthday, he wrote these words, which I think are just fabulous. John Wesley said, "This day I entered the 69th year of my age. I am still a wonder to myself. My voice and strength are the same as at 9 and 20. This hath God wrought." So, happy birthday, John. Also, several of you asked about the button I was wearing yesterday, Thursdays in Black. It's a program of the World Council of Churches, and it's designed for people all over the world to be aware of and to help other people be aware of violence against women. So people in Africa and Asia and Latin America and North America and Europe wear these buttons every Thursday and dress in black to remind the world that there still is violence against women. I'm going to leave this brochure for you in case you want more information about it. They do have the buttons in German.
Wer einen Hörer braucht, ja, also eine Übersetzung braucht, holt sich die. Dann bitte, da habe ich Ihnen jetzt nicht genügend Zeit gelassen. Ich sehe jetzt nur wenig Kopfhörer, aber es wird alles übersetzt. Gut, also Sie wissen, die sind da.
And also, I wanted to let you know about this newsletter that the Council of Bishops puts out 2 times every year about ecumenical and interreligious ministry from the United Methodist Church. And I will leave this copy with you. If you would like to be put on the newsletter, unfortunately, it's in English. But if you would like to get this emailed to you twice a year, I will also leave my card, and you can email me and tell me you would like to get this. Okay. So, this morning we're going to take a look at 2 different documents. We're going to talk about 2 resolutions. And we're going to talk about how resolutions in the United Methodist Church are created. And if it's okay, I would like to stop a couple times during my conversation with you to ask if you have questions. So I'm just letting the leaders know that I'm going to stop a couple times while I'm speaking to ask for questions. First, however, a review from the United Methodist Church about how we're put together and how resolutions come into being. In the United Methodist Church, there are 3 administrative branches. They're constructed in a way that is similar to a Western democracy. The first, the executive branch, is the Council of Bishops. And their job is to lead spiritually and administratively in the church. They are our spiritual and administrative leaders. That's Bishop Rupert's job, who was here yesterday. The second branch is the Judicial Council, and they're tasked with knowing the constitution of our church and making decisions when there are areas of disagreement within the church. And the third branch is the legislative branch. That's the General Conference. The General Conference is the only group in the United Methodist Church that can speak for the whole church. And they're tasked with making decisions and making legislation for the United Methodist Church. Now, in the United Methodist Church, any individual or any group can send a resolution or a petition to the General Conference for its consideration. You could choose something you wanted the General Conference to consider, and all you have to do is send that in. And I believe for the 2020 General Conference, the deadline is early September. So if you'd like to send something in, know that the time is now. When they're received, the General Conference determines which are resolutions and which are petitions, and then they're combined to make many resolutions come in. The ones that are similar are put together to make one. And then they're assigned to one of 12 legislative committees. So then when the delegates from all over the world get together for General Conference, each delegate is assigned to one of those 12 committees to talk about the resolutions and the petitions. And their job in that committee is to determine which of those petitions goes forward to be voted on by the whole General Conference. I hope that's a review. So in 2016 at the General Conference, I was assigned to the committee that was supposed to talk about social justice issues other than homosexuality. There were so many petitions and resolutions that came forward about homosexuality that they had to split that legislative group into two. And I was assigned to the group that did not talk about homosexuality. There were about 30 of us in the group, and our task was to talk about all those petitions that came in. Things like whether or not the United Methodist Church should impose a boycott on certain businesses, whether or not to change our denominational stance on abortion, how the United Methodist Church might make statements on climate change, and what we should say as United Methodists about the conflict in the Middle East. It took a lot of time because there needed to be translation, there were a lot of petitions, and there were a lot of opinions. But we sent to the General Conference our collective global decisions on which legislation should be put forward. And it's a fascinating process. And that is the way we do things as United Methodists. Resolutions are sent by individuals or groups to the General Conference and voted on by the delegates. And if the majority of delegates agree, they become principles by which we United Methodists live out our ministry. They're all put into something called the Book of Discipline, which I've seen. I know you have. The resolutions are put into this book. It's called the Book of Resolutions. It's different from the Book of Discipline because the Book of Discipline has things like our Constitution, our history, our polity. This is the one that contains our resolutions, the things we decide we want to say together as statements. It's only in English, at least I only have it in English, but you are more than welcome to take a look at it. Does anyone here have a copy of this book?
No.
No. Okay. If you would like me to email you an English one, I can do that, or to mail you an English one. So the Book of Resolutions, like the Book of Discipline, is updated after every General Conference. And then the resolutions that are in here are valid, are true, for 8 years. And then when that 8 years is finished, they can be reapproved and continued for an additional 8 years. And that process can keep happening for forever. The resolutions can be about anything connected to our United Methodist social principles. So, just like the social principles, they're in 7 categories: the natural world, the nurturing community, the social community, the economic community, the political community, the world community, and then other resolutions. So let me stop there and see if you have any questions about how the Book of Resolutions gets made. You are brilliant. So the category that is pertinent to our conversation today is the social community. That's the category we're going to look at today. And you'll find resolutions there about how United Methodists interact with others. For example, and all resolutions have both a title and a number. So resolution number 3125 is called Holocaust Memorial Day. And that's a resolution asking all United Methodists everywhere to commemorate the Holocaust once a year on Yom HaShoah, which is the Day of Remembrance that we talked about the first day. There's a resolution 3126, which is called Prejudice Against Muslims and Arabs in the United States. And this is a resolution that calls North American United Methodists to seek understanding of Islam, to reach out to our Muslim neighbors, and to stand in solidarity with them for justice. Resolution 3142 is called Guidelines for Cooperation in Ministry. And we're going to talk about that one in particular in a few minutes. Resolution 3144 is an important one to me. It's called Resolution of Intent with a View to Unity. And it's the standard document on how United Methodists are called to seek Christian unity globally. Resolution 3291 is called to be neighbors and witnesses, guidelines for interreligious relationships, which we're also going to talk about in a few minutes and which you've read. And then resolution 3292 is United Methodist Principles for Christian-Jewish Relations. And it's obviously a resolution that looks at how United Methodists can be in relationship with our Jewish brothers and sisters. So I just wanted to give you an example of some of the things you'll find in here in the section called the social community. I want to pause for a minute and talk about the definitions of a couple words, because we've been talking about ecumenical and interreligious and intercultural, and I want to make sure we're on the same page with those. So the word ecumenical, ecumenism, not an easy word to say. Ecumenical is taken from the Greek word the oikos, oikomene. Originally, in Greek, those words mean either the whole inhabited earth or the household. Over the years, the word ecumenical or ecumenism has come to mean unity of the whole inhabited world, or the household of God. And so particularly, we now use that word to talk about Christian unity, about how Christians all over the world are united together. That's ecumenical or ecumenism. The word interreligious is used to talk about how there's interaction between and among religions. The Christian religion, the Jewish religion, the Muslim religion. So ecumenical is Christian, interreligious is between and among religions. Does that make sense? Okay. And then the third word, intercultural, that can apply either to ecumenical or interreligious. That's when cultures work together and interact together. And that can happen in the Christian community and among and between interreligious communities. So, having said that, the first resolution we're going to look at is an ecumenical resolution. The second one we're going to look at is an interreligious resolution. Both are about being intercultural. Okay. So first of all, you should have taken a look at resolution 3142, Guidelines for Cooperation in Mission. And it happens to be found on page 203 of the 2016 Book of Resolutions. So it was written and adopted by the General Conference the first time in 2004. And remember, I told you it could be renewed every 8 years. It was renewed in 2012, which means it's up for renewal again in 2020. It's based on a statement from the World Methodist Council. So the United Methodist Church took the World Methodist Council statement and put it into a resolution. And the resolution reminds us that there's a new missionary movement spreading across the world. The first movement was in the 1800s mostly, and it was a time of great evangelical missional fervor. Most Western countries sent excited missionaries to places like Asia and Africa and Latin America, South America, in order to reach out with the love of Jesus Christ to people who had never heard of him. And as we mentioned, both on the first day and on the second day, this was a mixed blessing. The new movement has now been going on for several decades, and it's based on global migration and the increasing movement of people around the world. Guidelines for Cooperation in Ministry states that that migration is happening more and more. Sometimes migration happens because of political persecution or social persecution. Sometimes the reasons include fear of violence in the home country. Sometimes the reasons are economic. Whatever the case, the world is now a global community, and people are moving from country to country more and more. We are an example of that. And because of that, it would be smart for Christians and Methodists to talk about what our role in all of this movement should be. In this second movement, we are doing some things really well. And we're also not being very careful about some things. In fact, I would say if colonialism, imperialism, nationalism were the evils, unintended, of the first missionary movement, then this resolution names institutionalism, denominationalism as the unintended evils of our current migration movement. And that's important. So in the early 1800s, or throughout the 1800s, in that first missionary movement, the Protestant denominations, and that's my perspective, were sending missionaries all over the place, as I said, to get the gospel out to people. One missionary named William Carey thought it would be a good idea if all the missionaries around the world were to meet together to work on a plan to finish the task of world evangelism. The idea was to divide the world up so that missionaries wouldn't bump into each other and to be more efficient working together. In the early 1900s, a man named John R. Mott, who was a Methodist, picked up this idea, and he was a very influential person. So using that influence, he brought that idea of bringing missionaries, bringing denominations together to talk about global movement and missionaries. So the meeting was held in Edinburgh, and we heard about it yesterday in 1910, and it brought together an extraordinary group of leaders from many different denominations. And many people think that that particular meeting in Edinburgh was the beginning of what later became the World Council of Churches. The difference in our current missionary movement is that we now have churches firmly planted, but people are moving in and out of them. Global movement, as I said, has become increased and normalized. So a similar problem has arisen. When groups of people migrate to new places, they of course want to take their faith with them. And that's a good thing. If they're Christians, they want to plant a church in their new home. So the result is that churches are being planted where existing churches were already planted years and years ago. Often, there is very little or no communication with an existing church when a new migrant church is started. And this, of course, is causing pain denominationally and globally, and is honestly hurting our ecumenical ministry and witness. So I can name several examples of United Methodist missions or church starts being planted in places in the world where there are already churches in place, churches with whom our denomination has official, ecumenical, written down agreements. It's causing tension among our ecumenical partners. And this is happening in places like Canada and Great Britain and Israel and Italy and South Africa and Latin America, literally all over the world. We're planting new migrant United Methodist churches instead of working with existing Wesleyan or other Protestant churches with whom we have written agreements. Let me give you an example. Because of the volatile political conditions and difficult economic conditions, many United Methodists have moved out of the country of Zimbabwe. And some of them have found themselves in Canada, where they feel safe and they're finding good paying jobs. This group of Zimbabwean United Methodists have found each other, and they've decided that they want to build a church where they can worship in the way they were raised. So they've started a new United Methodist church. This is wonderful, life-giving, holy news. Except, back in the early 1900s, the United Methodist Church joined with a group of Christians seeking unity and became a part of the United Church of Canada. And at that time, we as Methodists agreed that all Methodists in Canada, United Methodists in Canada, would become a part of the United Church of Canada, and that we would no longer plant United Methodist churches there. By planting churches there, we're breaking our promise. In this particular case, the United Church of Canada is being exceptionally gracious. They're working with the United Methodist Bishop in Zimbabwe to partner with him and to start this new church. They're helping to support the United Methodist pastor, and they're inviting her to their fellowships and their trainings. And that kind of graciousness is very much appreciated, but is not always the case. And I want to be very clear. There are no demons here. There are no bad guys. There's no one in the wrong here. It's a complex issue because faithful United Methodists are migrating to other parts of the world, and they have to do that to be safe and to live a fulfilled life. They move to a new place and they want to thank God and worship God as they have been raised to do. And maybe they try out the local existing church, but for whatever reason, they find it more comfortable to worship in the style, in the language in which they've been raised. And they want to worship with people who have also migrated from their home country to their new country. They want to start a United Methodist worshiping community. It makes sense. The bishop wants to help them and wants to shepherd them into staying into the church. So he or she sends a pastor, and a new church is born. This is something about which we can rejoice. Except the church down the street has been there for over 100 years maybe, and it's hurt that the new people don't want to be a part of their already existing, perfectly fine in their mind, congregation. So they call their denominational hierarchy, and they learn that they have an ecumenical agreement with the United Methodist Church that United Methodists won't start new churches in areas where they exist. International hurt and mistrust and confusion between the United Methodist Church and the other denomination are the result. And our bishops are left with trying to ease that tension and work out compromise. So you see this as a complex issue. And that's why cooperation, guidelines for cooperation in ministry and mission was written to help find a solution, to help find a way forward. So in the document, we're reminded that the World Methodist Council asks for all its member churches which includes the United Methodist Church, to live by 3 principles: respect each other, show courtesy to each other, and be in communication and consultation with each other. Beyond those 3 basic principles, there are 2 specific things asked of United Methodists when new faith communities are started. First, before supporting or endorsing a new mission or ministry in any part of the world, the United Methodist Church should check with the World Methodist Council to let them know of their desire to engage in new work in a particular area, and to seek advice from World Methodist Council members in that area in order to minimize or prevent duplication of ministries, duplication of resources. The resolution advises those coming into a new area to partner with an existing church in the area, to partner with them. And the resolution says, we believe it's possible to order our relationships in a cooperative way and to help new fellowships to seek the most appropriate church to join. The other specific thing asked of the United Methodist Church is that when United Methodists find themselves working alongside other World Methodist Council churches, they should join together in a spirit of cooperation and consultation, and they should communicate fully with each other and share resources and share experiences. The resolution says that no World Methodist Council member should ever be in competition with another one, because that implies the breakdown of the principles of respect and courtesy and communication. The suggestion instead is to set up regular meetings and make clear expectations, and that there's some sort of oversight among the 2 denominations. So the United Methodist Church originally adopted these guidelines in 2004 as an expression of the belief in Christian unity and the desire to be in solidarity with other member churches of the World Methodist Council. However, we are still receiving complaints regularly about what's going on. So when you get into your small groups, one of the things I want you to talk about is with this particular document, do you still see colonialism at work? Because I do. And so did the World Methodist Council. And so recently, very recently, the World Methodist Council sponsored a consultation on migrant and diaspora churches. It was held the first few days of this month outside London, and it was attended by Methodists from all over the world, all different kinds of Methodists from all over the world. And they gathered together to have a very challenging conversation on this very topic. We talked about how wonderful it is that United Methodists want to plant new churches in places for migrant populations. And we realized that most of us have migrant stories. We talked about how the church works with the phenomenon of migration matters as a witness to our Christian faith. And we talked about how even those who are migrating have a call to share that ecumenical commitment. In the end, a new document was produced. And I brought the copy in English. However, and I do have it right here. However, Yorkie and I have it in German. So if you'd like to take a look at the version of this new document in German, it can be emailed to you. The document calls United Methodists to think deeply about what our identity is, how we identify ourselves. Do we call ourselves global Christians, or do we call ourselves United Methodists? And it asks us to express that identity in 3 ways. And that's a very important question. And I think it does have to do with institutionalism and denominationalism and colonialism. So how we identify ourselves. And these 3 specific things it asks us to do. through collaboration and partnership with mutual accountability between migrant churches and host churches, we express that identity. So the first thing we're asked to do is collaborate with existing churches. But the second thing is to have an intercultural awareness between migrant populations and host populations. That's a change from what we have in the Book of Resolutions now. And the third thing is to make sure we're involved in advocacy and humanitarian assistance by host churches to migrant populations and churches working together to know what migrant needs are. Okay, that's this first document, and an additional document we might want to consider at 2020 instead of what we have in the Book of Resolutions. Are there any questions about Resolution 3142? Yes, sir.
Just very basic. What is the number and title of the new document?
Right, the new document has not been sent to General Conference yet. It was just written 3 weeks ago. So it's brand new.
The title?
The title of this one is God is on the Move, a call to be the church in a new way.
Dadurch, dass jetzt auf dem Kirchentag auch Jean Hawxhurst mit unserer früheren Bischöfin, also Bischöfin in Ruhe, Rosemarie Wenner, gesprochen hat und sie uns gesagt hat, dass dieses Dokument ins Deutsche übersetzt worden ist, haben wir es gestern erst bekommen. Darum konnten wir es noch nicht vorher ausdrucken oder verteilen, aber wir haben uns vorgenommen, also einfach davon zu berichten und wir werden das dann einstellen und ich werde es dann auch an alle weiterschicken. Aber wie gesagt, es wird ja auch erst dann angenommen, aber es ist so wichtig, dass es schon mal ins Deutsche übersetzt worden ist.
I'm sending around the English copy of that, and I hope what you just said is that you have the German copy, or you have the ability to...
I will send it around because we can send it to us.
Yes, good, thank you. Other questions? Yes.
Yeah, you mentioned the second. I think the second resolution of this new document to increase intercultural awareness. Is that what it said? Which is different from what you have in the Book of Resolutions right now.
Yes, that's where it becomes a little bit more updated.
Okay, so there was intercultural awareness before.
Well, implicitly implied. But the resolution you have, guidelines, that one, is more about how the migrant group should be behaving with the host church. And there's nothing asking the host church to behave well with the migrant population. Well, I just answered my question about colonialism.
Yes, because I think what you mentioned, that migrants would like to worship in a way they'll feel comfortable. And I was just wondering, are we supposed to be comfortable at the church? I don't know.
Good point, good point. Comfortable may not be the appropriate English word, and remain sensitive to areas of historic tension. The third is to work with persons of other faith communities to resolve problems in the shared community. There was an example of that shared last night. Fourth was to plan community celebrations with interreligious perspectives. And fifth is to develop new models of community building that strengthen relationships and honor harmony and integrity of differences. So those are the principles, the foundation. And then this document calls us to 6 actions. And the 6 actions are: United Methodists are supposed to oppose anything that seeks to label Muslims in a negative way. Period. We oppose it. Number 2, counter stereotypical and bigoted statements made. If you're in a room and your friends are making fun of Muslims or speaking negatively of Muslims, you say that's not okay. 3, increase knowledge of neighbor by study and personal contact. What does it mean to be a Jew? What does it mean to be a Sikh or a Muslim or a Buddhist? 4, act decisively to include Arabs and Muslims in community organizations. So if there's something going on in the community, we reach out to them and invite them to be a part of it with us. Number 5, we pray for the perfection of community among us. We are Methodist. We believe we are going on to perfection, and we want to pray that our community of faith is going on to perfection as well. And then we use official United Methodist statements like this one to denounce practices of discrimination. Share this with your congregation. Make sure they know the official United Methodist stand. So those 6 actions are significant. They call for United Methodists to be proactive and assertive in our beliefs. This is an area to be loving and not timid. As United Methodists, we know who we are. We witness to Christ's loving action in our lives, and we boldly love others no matter who they are. So there you have it. The United Methodist Church has created both of these documents to actively help us know how to be with others ecumenically and interreligiously in mission and ministry and evangelism in the world. They're common sense documents, but they are excellent reminders that we do not exist in this world apart from others and from important relationships with others. Relationships where we can reveal the love of Jesus for us. So I think now, I'm not sure exactly what the schedule is, but you will have significant time to be in groups and to talk about these documents and what they mean to us personally and practically. I do want you to talk about somehow the idea of colonialism, and also, are they going to get the list of questions? No, okay. So another question I want to make sure that you ask is about that first document. Why is it important to honor ecumenical commitments? And why is it as important to honor ecumenical commitments as it is to plant new faith communities? Do you understand the question? Because they're pulling in 2 different directions. Why are they both important? Okay, so I will sit down. Thank you so much.